Hello, and welcome to a guide on the Bricks and Minifigs current drama. Now, this will be as of uh, Wednesday, June 3rd, or I guess very early in the morning. Uh, Basically, Tuesday the 2nd, because it's too early that I don't think anything has happened today. Uh, Mountain Standard Time, I guess, because I am from Utah, if you didn't know. Welcome to my channel if you're here for the first time. I do Lego stuff as a hobby on this channel, and so I wanted to make this to kind of guide people because I know there are a lot of people in the Lego community that are seeing this pop up, and there's a lot of information to go through, and a lot of people have been commenting on it. I'm not going to pretend like I am the most informed person on the world about the situation, but I thought it might be helpful to just provide a video that essentially guides people through what they should watch um, and essentially like tell people how to get the context for the situation, and then we can go into a section on my thoughts on the situation. So I would largely recommend starting with the original Reckless Ben video. It was released 12 days ago on May 21st, titled I Tracked Down the Thief Who Stole $200,000 of Lego. That would be a good starting point. Then from there, you'd want to go to his part 2 video, which is also there. It came out 3 days ago publicly, but it was out at the time of the original video coming out on his Patreon. That video is currently titled I Got Arrested Because of Legos. And then you also have, again, on Reckless Ben's channel, you have Bricks and Minifigs responded to my video. I got a Bricks and Minifigs leaked email, and my response to the police, which are all good videos to watch. However, my response to the police obviously should come after you watch the American Fork Police Department's response. I'm not sure if I have this here, but you can find it on the American Fork Police YouTube channel. I'm sure if you look it up, you can find it. It's the one with the guy whispering at the podium. So yeah, after you watch that, you should watch My Response to the Police by Reckless Ben. You should also watch, there's a couple videos from Lawful Masses on YouTube, or otherwise known as if I can speak, Lawful Masses with Leonard French. He's got one video titled They Stole His 200K Lego Collection ... legally question mark. And then he's also got a video from a day ago labeled Rico Suits and Restraining Orders. The Bricks and Minifigs chaos just got worse. Those are really fair and balanced, short-ish, informative videos on the exact legal proceedings in this case. I would also recommend watching, they're a bit longer, but watching the ACOB or a couple of Brickheads streams. They've got one with Crystal, the former owner of the Kaiser Bricks and Minifig store. I forget the COO's first name, but McNeff, the COO from Bricks and Minifigs, as well as Reckless Ben. They interviewed them all on one stream, obviously at separate times, and then they also did a second stream with Eamon McNeff, the CEO of Bricks and Minifigs. I would recommend checking all of those out. Obviously, a lot of people have done really great commentary on it. Shout out Nicholas Diorio, Penguin Zero, or Charlie Moist Critical. Obviously, that's where a lot of people have seen it, just because his channel's really big. I'm subscribed. I don't know that he really gives a whole lot of insightful commentary, but that's just a personal preference, I guess. Duck Bricks has had a pretty good video on it. There's been lots. I'm trying to see here. What else have I been watching? I guess very importantly, just today, there was a video. If I can find. Okay. From Patreon and Jack Con Extras, or Cont Extras. I think it's supposed to be a play on words of content and extras, but the CEO of Patreon responded to Bricks and Minifigs LLC. That one is a short 50-second video, but is very important and could be very important going forward, depending on how Bricks and Minifigs wants to continue to handle this situation. So I guess going over my thoughts on the situation, obviously I would recommend watching all of those videos, and there's been a lot of good commentary. I think just about everyone in the LEGO space has talked about this. I put out a post when I watched, because Nicholas Diorio covered the original video. I watched that. I watched part 2 through Patreon, and I put out a post on my YouTube channel. I really think that everyone should look into this situation, and I said it in the post, but I think that everyone should boycott Bricks and Minifigs at this point. And I want to make it clear, because this is something that the Bricks and Minifigs corporate have been very eager to do and point out, is that yes, boycotts do affect the individual franchisees. They affect the ma and pa's that own these small shops. However, it does also affect corporate. That's the whole point of a boycott. It's unfortunate. I've said in the past, I've been to many of Bricks and Minifigs. As far as I'm aware, the only one in the state that I haven't visited is the one down in Cedar City. I've been to the one in Orem that their owner, at least as far as I'm aware, it's the same person, is wrapped up in all of this. And I will say that I don't go to Orem very often. Wasn't planning on going there, but I've been to, because it's South Jordan, Bountiful, and Salt Lake. Those are all owned by the same guy. I really like him, from the limited interactions that I've had with him. He seems like a pretty cool guy. I know one of the Taylorsville owners, from the limited interactions I've had with him, he seems like a pretty genuinely cool guy. I've been to the Logan and Ogden stores, and they both like seem pretty chill. The Logan store is like fairly small, but is like a pretty cool environment. I feel bad for all of them, but one thing that I wish Bricks and Minifigs corporate would acknowledge is that all of the quote unquote harassment or boycotting that they are facing is because of corporate. It's not because of Reckless Ben. As much as, sure, yeah, he brought attention to the situation, they could have stopped it at any moment. Like, to make a crude analogy to get this point apart, it's like if the franchises were corporate's dog, and they just, they keep shocking it with a shock collar to get it to stay in place for 8 hours. And Reckless Ben makes a video going, hey, these people are shocking their dog to make it stay in one spot for 8 hours. And then corporate comes out and goes, hey guys, like, we need this to stop, Everyone keeps, like, harassing our dog and wants to, like, let our dog go outside and stuff. It's our dog. Just let us shock it. Please, let us shock our dog. Like, it's like, dude, no. Just stop shocking your dog. Like, you're the one bringing on the harassment. Like, you're the ones that are causing the damage to your franchisees. And, like, I'm no lawyer, but I've seen the idea floated around, and I would recommend that, any franchisee owner out there may want to look into, like, if there's a class action lawyer out there, they may want to try and start getting in contact with franchise owners across the country and say, hey, your corporate has clearly done reputational damage to your business. Like, do you want to go after them? Because I think they'd have a pretty solid case at this point. The fact that corporate sent out an email that was like, hey guys, this whole situation will just die down within 3 to 7 days, so long as, no one talks about it. So just tell people that you don't know anything about this. And meanwhile, they're going on live streams with, like, small YouTubers, good for ACOB for, like, getting the story, and I think they've done a largely fair job at, like, getting those interviews. I know a lot of silly people, to put it nicely, have been like, oh, you went all softball on them, and it's like, well, I mean, yeah, they could either have an hour-long interview and let the COO and the CEO hang themselves with their own rope, or they could have a 5 to 2 minute interview where they go, hey, fuck you, you're evil. They go, okay, yeah, this isn't a productive conversation, I'm gonna leave. I prefer the hour or so of them hanging themselves, but, to each their own, I guess. But, like, and that's not to say that, like, oh, Reckless Ben is innocent in all of this. Like, I do think that Lawful Masses does a really good job of pointing out where exactly Reckless Ben has gone wrong in some cases, some poor understandings of the law on his side. But Bricks and Minifigs corporate has clearly done more wrong. Like, that's kind of the unfortunate case for them, is that as much as people might be willing to go, like, oh yeah, Reckless Ben, this crazy YouTube guy that's just doing all this for clicks, it's like, well, sure, maybe, but I mean, corporate's also done some pretty, like, bad things, like, And, like, especially part 2 and the American Fork Police Department's response. Like, I'm sorry, but it is absurd that one of the owners of the Kaiser store that, like, lives here in Utah called the American Fork Police Department and said, hey, if you don't come down and deal with this guy, I'm gonna shoot him. And there's been no repercussions for that. It's like, I'm sorry, like, you know, I'm from Utah. I'm from here. I've been born and raised. Like, I got my concealed carries permit here. You know, I got it a little bit before we didn't actually need it anymore, because now we're a constitutional carry state. But, you know, it's good because it transfers to most any other state, with very limited exceptions. I think it's like 38 states that it's accepted in. But part of that course is explaining that, yeah, we are in a stand your ground state. That doesn't mean that you can just shoot people. You can't shoot people even if they just come onto your property. Like, that's not how that works. You have to legitimately think that they are posing a threat to your life or other people's lives. Like, you know, like the whole purpose of all these laws is to make sure that people don't end up dead. Like, you know, that's the whole purpose of, like, arming yourself, is to make sure that people don't end up dead. You know, like, I know that a lot of people in different states that have different gun laws have, like, a hard time wrapping their head around it. You know, there's a really bad misconception that, oh, red states, you know, there isn't any laws around guns. And it's like, no, that's not true. Like, you know, we just have different laws around guns. Like, you know, and we can have an argument on, like, what laws are good and what aren't, you know, and, like, there are plenty of laws that, like, I take issue with here. But one thing that I do like about Utah is that I think a lot of our laws are, like, fairly marginal, or not marginal, what's the word? Mutually written? There's a word that I'm looking for, but basically they're pretty fairly written. We'll insert that word for now. Where, like, you know, it's pretty reasonable to go, hey, if someone's inside your house threatening your family, then yeah, you can shoot them. Like, you're in your full legal right to stop them from threatening your family. However, if a drunk guy stumbles into your house and passes out on your couch, you don't have the right to just shoot him. You know? Because obviously, there's no threat to anyone. You can very easily just call the police and say, hey, there's some random guy in my house. Can you please come take him out? And they will. Like, you know, like, so the idea that he's like, oh my god, like, Reckless Ben, he's on my lawn, I'm gonna shoot him. Like, sorry, but if I made that call to the police, and, you know, I'm not in America Fork, which I will say has a statewide reputation of not being that great of a police force, you know, being pretty sketchy when it comes to a lot of things, but I would hope that the police would come and tell me, hey, you gotta hand over your guns for a little bit. Because, like, you know, even in our state, like, you know, if you're not mentally well, you're not allowed to have guns. Like, you know, which actually, you know, as much as, like, I really like the Second Amendment, and I think it's very important, I do think that, you know, if you're not mentally sound enough to have a gun, that's a lot different than, you know, the government saying that no one can have guns. Like, you know, I think there's a big difference there. And, you know, obviously there are, like, you know, slippery slope arguments for, like, well, what constitutes not being mentally sound? And, you know, that's fine. We can get into that, like, you know, in a different discussion. But obviously, like, you know, the way that it is, you're not allowed to, like, I can't just call the cops and say, hey, I'm going to shoot someone, and expect them to be like, oh, okay, we'll rush down there and just not do anything. Like, you know, it's like, I would expect them to rush down there and go, okay, well, this guy isn't really threatening you, so yeah, we kind of need you to, like, hand over your guns or, like, come with us to the station or something. Like, you know, we'll put you in protective custody. Like, will that make you feel better? But we can't, like, you kind of just threatened to shoot someone. We can't really just leave you here with your guns while you're in this state of, like, oh my god, I'm gonna shoot someone. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, you know, and that's not even going into all of the other, like, clear civil liberty violations that the American Fork Police Department have committed. I don't understand what the purpose of having body cam footage with redacted audio is. That's ridiculous. The whole point of body cam footage is for full public transparency. If you're not going to be fully public transparent, then fuck you. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of that simple. Like, no, you don't get to do that. You know, like, it's really unsettling, the idea that, like, a police department, you know, not super close to me, but, like, in the same state, that they just fully expected to be able to get away with just straight up redacting what should be publicly available information. You know, the idea that they've already identified a victim in this case before it's even gone to court, and when they're not, like, as far as we're aware, they're not pushing criminal charges. Like, that's what they've come out and said. So it's like, if there's not a criminal, then how can there be a victim? Like, you know, that's ridiculous. It's also ridiculous when, you know, they're saying that they're doing all this, like, redactions to protect the victim, and meanwhile they're out there doxing them. Like, you know, like, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not really sure, but as far as I'm aware, that's been elevated to the Utah County level, which isn't much better. I would trust it a lot better if it were elevated to, like, the Salt Lake County, because Utah County is known for being pretty religious. So, you know, like, obviously I think the best option is to get it raised to the federal level. You know, like, I think that's where the investigation into the police force should happen. But we'll see where that happens. And I guess something else that I should touch on there, though I don't think it's a big part of the case. I do want to just briefly touch on the fact that I don't talk about this a whole lot. I've briefly mentioned it on my main channel, I believe in my Heretic review, because that actually played in quite a bit to my perspective on that movie. But I've been born and raised in Utah. I grew up in the church. I'm not a member of the church anymore. I'm coming up. I think next year will be my 10-year anniversary of leaving the church. The idea that this is the Mormon Mafia, I don't think it is. I think it's a lot more likely that the American Fork Police Department is just stupid. I mean, they're, like I've said, like, they're kind of known throughout the state of being, like, not a great police department. I know that some people have, like, speculated, because there are so many cops that show up in, like, all these videos, that, like, oh my god, like, you know, they're after him. But, you know, outside of Salt Lake, in Utah, largely, like, I guess outside of Salt Lake and Ogden, in Utah, largely, there's not a whole lot of crime. So if the cops get called, that's, like, the one exciting thing that they'll have to do that day, you know. Otherwise they're just pulling over people for, like, speeding or, You know, you've got an expired registration. But like, you know, for the most part, a lot of the towns in Utah, if you call the cops, like, you probably will get a minimum of like 3 cop cars, because they've got nothing better to do. Like, you know, they might as well all respond to a call. So I don't think that's the evidence of like, oh, like they all got called in for this. Like, you know, yeah, they were bored. Like, they weren't doing anything else. But I will say that, like, I think it is more likely that they were just being stupid than the Mormon Mafia. I also want to respond to, like, because I will say I've seen quite a few people online be like, oh, this is so ridiculous, the idea of the Mormon Mafia. And sorry, I guess you just don't know your history. But like, that's clearly a thing. Like, that has been a thing pretty much since the inception of the Mormons. Like, you know, what do you think happened to like the Nauvoo battalion, like, you know, or not the Nauvoo militia? And like, you know, then they became because it was a Nauvoo militia, and I forget what the other militia was called, but there were 2 back before Joseph Smith died. You know, that's part of one of the things that I don't like about the church, is that they try and always portray Joseph Smith's death as like, oh, he died an innocent martyr on his way to prison. Like, you know, an angry mob came out and killed him. No, he was being transported by a state militia and had 2 Mormon militias come up and try and operate a pincer maneuver. And he also had a gun, which he then fired into the open crowd, and he got shot. According to the LDS Church, he didn't hit anyone with any of the rounds that he got off. But, you know, it's like, I'm sorry, but yeah, like, he opened fire into a crowd of militia. Like, you know, like, there were 3 separate militias that he was surrounded by, and he opened fire. What did he think was going to happen? Like, you know, sorry, he was stupid. But, like, you know, that's where the Mormon Mafia comes from, is that militia. You know, we know that they acted out in Utah. Like, you know, Mountain Meadows Massacre is a pretty blatant example of the church going, hey, yeah, we don't like the, you know, sorry guys, but like, you know, and I don't mean this to like offend, you know, again, born and raised LDS. Like, I got a lot of friends and still some family that are all LDS. Like, I don't mean to disrespect them, because a lot of them are good people. A lot of them are just ignorant, like, to the facts. So, like, sorry, but yeah, the church doesn't really have a great history of following the law. The church has a really good history of setting their own law and following that. You know, which is largely rules for me, not for thee, or yeah, vice versa, whatever. You know, because we can go into Mountain Meadows, and then, you know, we've got, like, even in the 80s, the Lafferty murders, like, that one's really concerning, because it's like, yeah, guys, why did the church go, hey, so we see that there have been, like, people that are murdered, but, you know, you really just shouldn't look into it. It's like, that's, yeah, guys, like, that's really concerning. You know, I guess all allegedly, of course, you know, we've got, like, Las Vegas, like, it's a big part of Vegas's founding, was that, like, Salt Lake was the biggest town in the West, and then they said, hey, you know, we kind of want to keep our squeaky clean image around here. So the Mormon Mafia pushed the actual Mafia out of Salt Lake and said, you know, we'll set you up in this little area, and you can do all the crimes you want as long as you keep it down there. You start coming up here and we're gonna start cracking heads. Like, you know, like that's largely like what happened. You know, so I don't know, this idea that like the Mormon Mafia doesn't exist. It's like, okay, like, no, it does. Like, it clearly does. The idea that, oh, well, like, you know, there's not corruption with the church. It's like, well, I mean, like, they spent $1.2 billion building a mall. Like, you know, like City Creek Mall in Salt Lake, like, yeah, it's a lovely building, you know, it makes for a great parking lot. But, like, what is a church doing building a mall? Like, when did God give them the divine inspiration to, hey, we really need a Disney store in downtown Salt Lake? Like, you know, you gotta put that up, you know? Where are we gonna get our Macy's store put in if we don't have that there? But, like, you know, and I'm pretty sure... I could be wrong on these numbers. It's been quite a while since I've like actually looked into it, but like the LDS Church, as far as I'm aware, aside from the government, is the largest private landowner in the United States, which it's like, yeah, guys, that should be pretty concerning considering that like this is a church of 10 million members, maybe half of that being active. If we're being generous, I mean, their numbers have been going down over time, like especially over the last 25 years. But you know, like, yeah, it's a little concerning. It's a little concerning that we know from like they spend, I believe it's just as much, if not more, than the Catholic Church on NDAs, which again, for how small the LDS Church is compared to the Catholic Church, that's pretty damn concerning. You know, like, we're pretty aware, and like it's been pretty made public that like the Catholic Church, you know, when they spend money on NDAs, it's because their priests are touching kids. Like, you know, it's kind of scary to think, what might the LDS Church be spending all that money on? You know, how many cover-ups are they involved in? You know, there's a lot of reasons that I could go into on why the LDS Church ain't so great. But I will say, like, again, I just want to make clear that the individual members themselves should not be gone after. You know, that I don't think anyone should be really looked at a different way for being Mormon, for being LDS. I don't know. I find it really funny. I'm sorry, like, just mini tangent, but because all the time that I was through the church, being a Mormon was fine. Like, that was a totally accepted term. And then after I left, they tried to rebrand and go, no, guys, you have to be called a Latter-day Saint. Like, you know, if people call you a Mormon, that's a slur. Like, why would anyone? Like, that's literally... The Book of Mormon is the thing that sets them apart from other Christianity. Like, but, okay, whatever. But, like, yeah, I don't think that the individual members should go after, because I think that a lot of the individual members are good people. You know, like I said before, a lot of them are just ignorant to the church's history. Some of them aren't. Like, I will say that, like, especially through leaving the church, I met quite a few church members that were fully aware of the church's history and their faults, and that they remained because of, like, the good community and stuff. And while that's a life decision that I personally chose not to make, you know, for various reasons, I can understand that, and I don't necessarily think that they're a bad person for choosing to do that. But I would hope that they would recognize that, like, it's not bad, that it's bad when people go against the individuals. However, when the individuals go against the organization, that, like, that's okay. That, like, there is a lot of stuff to point out, you know, like, I grew up on, like, you know, a unfortunately significant portion of my childhood was on Bishop Storehouse foods. You know, that's not to say that they were bad. Like, a lot of them were quite good. Like, I specifically remember the ice cream was always really cool. You know, you got vanilla or chocolate that you could choose from. But, like, especially after leaving the church, it's like, guys, shouldn't we question why the church has its own ice cream making facility? Like, you know, like, we're talking, it's not like the Bishop Storehouse was, oh, they went out and bought a bunch of products and, like, you know, held them. No, the church manufactures its own products. Like, they have their own labels and stuff, and it's like, you know, at what point do we go, like, really? Like, did you really have divine inspiration in the graphic design of your, like, logo, you know? Did the person taking the sample photo for the ice cream box, like, did they have divine inspiration on that? Like, you know, it's like, I don't know, man. Like, maybe, you know, I'll put it this way. I definitely don't think that they should be tax exempt. And as much as I don't think this Bricks and Minifigs situation ties into the church, I mean, I don't think it can be denied that their entire corporate structure, all being devout LDS, I mean, that's 10% of every one of their incomes that goes to the church. And depending on how they view the term income, they may also be donating 10% of Bricks and Minifigs, the company's profits, to the church, which then they get a big tax write-off. And you know, there's all sorts of financial fuckery that I don't like around that. You know, it's all legal, sure, but, you know, is it moral? That's another question. But to say that there's no incentive from the church to, like, protect these people, it's like, that's a little silly. You know, to say that there's incentive enough for them to, like, be actively corrupting the police to protect them, I think that might be a bit of a stretch, you know. Like, again, the church, one of the things that we know from some of the other court cases that the church has been going through is that they have enough money that your tithe money, you know, if you're a LDS member, I think this is really important to know, and you can look this up. The church fully admitted this in court, that all of your tithe money doesn't actually go towards any of the products that are, like, services that they say it does. It goes into bank accounts. And it's the interest on your tithe money, which they also call tithes, that is what they pay for stuff with. So if you think about, you know, all the new temples and churches and all those things that they put up, all of the Bishop Storehouse food, all of the DIs that they run, you know, all the furniture shops and stuff that they run, all the land that they maintain, all of that is being paid with by the interest on the money that they have. Yeah, the church has a lot of money, and I really, you know, I don't know that burning that to save Bricks and Minifigs is really worth it to them. But who knows, you know, the LDS Church, their leadership has never quite been the smartest when it comes to running schemes. You know, that goes all the way back to Joseph Smith, and, you know, like, yeah, I'm not going to say that they've ever been the smartest at handling their money. But whether, yeah, like, if there's a big enough incentive for them to save one Lego company in Utah, I doubt it. Like, you know, I think they're a large enough organization that they won't. But I guess putting all that to the side, I get that probably should have made it to the end of the video. I'll probably put a timestamp earlier to skip past this section. So hey, if you just clicked on that timestamp, or if you came to this timestamp, we're done with the Mormon talk. So I kind of want to go into Bricks and Minifigs, what they can do, and what they have done. Because if you've seen my other channel content, I run a weekly show called BTFO, or Brief Thoughts for Others. Largely I cover movies, occasionally shows or whatnot, mostly movies for the most part. But one thing that you'll know is that writing consistency and like internal logic are big hang-ups for me that I have when it comes to storytelling. And so looking at the narratives that have been put out by Crystal, Reckless Ben, and Bricks and Minifigs, the one that holds up the least is Bricks and Minifigs' story. It is filled with contradictions, and has the least amount of evidence presented supporting it. Then Crystal's, and then Ben's. I think Ben's largely has a lot of well-documented, well-publicized evidence to support his story. I think his narrative largely makes sense. Whether that makes it true or not is going to be revealed. But as of right now, as of recording, I'm inclined to believe his events, or his story of events, a lot more than anyone else's, because he's presented his evidence and it makes sense. According to him, the story goes that Brian had his collection on consignment, the store got taken over, and then they told Brian, nah, actually we don't have your stuff anymore. If you want to try and get your stuff, we can just drag this out in court. Screw you. And it's like, well, unfortunately, like, that makes sense. All the wild actions that they've taken with, like, the corrupt police and all that, like, that all fits into that narrative of this company that just, for some reason, really doesn't want to give back the Lego. Now, what that reason is could be a little bit better on Ben's side, right? Because I think largely Ben's story is framed around trying to figure out what that reason could be. However, I don't know that he's really presented a clear reason on that. We'll kind of get to what I think that reason could be. But then, as far as Bricks and Minifigs' story goes, the original owner, Crystal, made a consignment deal with Ben, or not with Ben, with Brian, that she wasn't allowed to make according to their owners and operations manual. However, we'll caveat that they came in and took over the store and then said that, no, actually, we never made a consignment deal, so we don't have to honor it. And then tried to present Brian with, okay, you want your stuff back? Well, we've got about $2,000 to $5,000 worth of Lego Star Wars sets here. You want to take those? And so obviously Brian said, no, I have $200,000 worth of stuff there. You're going to give me that back. Then they told him, okay, we'll drag this out in court if you want to pursue this legally. And then the whole situation with Ben happened, and they've been avoiding lawsuit after lawsuit while saying that they really care about the law. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, it's like, obviously these are brief descriptions of each of their narratives, and, you can go check out their videos and interviews for their full narratives. And one video that I forget if I mentioned, but Crystal, the original owner, does have a video going over her GoFundMe in which she clarifies a lot of the story on her side, which her story is that per the franchise agreement, she was explicitly allowed to make consignment deals, which she has presented, and it's disputed by the COO and the CEO of Bricks and Minifigs, because supposedly they say that applies to, like, food trucks or something, which, sorry, that's not what consignment is. Like, I don't know why you'd say that. Like, use a different word. Like, there's a different word. Like, that's contracting, not consignment. Like, that's different. But, and then, again, according to BAM Corporate, their owners and operations manual, like, says that they're not allowed to do consignment, but they haven't presented that, which, guys, if it's a standard manual, you should be able to present that, right? Like, if it's basically your employee handbook for your franchisees, should be in a downloadable PDF or, like, a form that you can hand out to people physically, so that it can't just be altered on the fly. Like, that should be something you should be able to present, but they haven't yet. So, I have to take it with a grain of salt because you haven't shown it to me. But Crystal claims that she had this consignment deal, and that her husband was given an opportunity to go abroad, or for some reason related around publishing and politics, that they thought they may have to go abroad. So they contacted Bricks and Minifigs about selling the store. And according to Crystal, this is when BAM Corporate basically informed her that she was severely in debt to them because the lease on her building had never been paid off, and that she had missed a lot of payments. And according to her, and I believe I'm getting all this right, I could be mistaken, so I would recommend their video as well as the Lawful Masses video. He does a really good job of explaining it, but as far as my understanding is, that could entirely be wrong, Crystal says that Bricks and Minifigs arranged for the lease of the building, and they were going to pay it out of a corporate account, which she was going to pay into. However, the account was, I believe it was frozen, or it was, because it would have had to been activated, but it was frozen, so she wasn't able to pay into it, and all of the notices for, like, lack of payment or overdue payments all went to BAM Corporate, which they never notified her of until she went to sell. And so it looks like they may have used that as an excuse to come in, say, hey, you actually owe us a bunch of money, so we're just going to repossess your store. It says right here in this contract that we get to take all of your inventory. Ha ha ha, you lose. Good day. Sure, maybe they're legally in the right to do that. I don't know how they think it makes them look good, but And then, according to Bricks and Minifigs, corporate, they say that she had taken most of Brian's collection. Now that seems odd because, again, there's no proof of that. And for all the cameras and stuff around the store, and for the fact that she was documenting that Brian's collection was still in the store, it seems like a really odd... Like, I don't know how I could possibly buy in to corporate's narrative on that. Where, like, even let's say that she stole the whole thing and that she was going to have $200,000 to flee the country with. Like, she's going to Spain. Like, don't get me wrong, like, $200,000, like, that's a good amount of money. But it's not really enough money to, like, start a whole new life somewhere else. Like, it's not really enough money to, like, oh, I'm going to retire on this. Like, no. Like, you might get by for, like, a few years. Like, you might be able to comfortably relocate and get a new job, but, like, I don't know that you're gonna just, like, go off into the sunset with that. But, like, I will give them credit. There is a dispute between her story and Brian's story on how much he had actually been paid versus how much was actually sold. And so that is a question that is up in the air, that, like, will have to be resolved in court. It would be very nice to see this. It's one of those things that I really hope Crystal and the Gormans, for me at least, as a big Andor guy, it's been really funny that they're the Gormans. We are the Gore, let's go. But, like, I hope that they get their way and that they have their trial in public. Whereas Bricks and Minifigs is very much trying to make a private settlement on their front. I think at this point, which I don't know, maybe there is a lot that Bricks and Minifigs is hiding, but I would imagine that it's probably the best PR for them to be, like, if they believe that they're fully in the right on all of these accounts, have these trials in public. Like, that's what you want. You want your lawyers, like, you hired a top-of-the-line law firm, finally, suck at the law. Look into that story if you haven't seen that. I believe you can find it on Les's channel. But, like, they hired pretty good lawyers. You'd think that you'd want them to make that case publicly, that, no, actually, you're... Like, Bricks and Minifigs has been innocent this whole time. We'll see. But personally, a theory that I've seen floated around, that obviously there's no concrete proof yet, but that I could buy, is that Brandon, I believe Brandon was the one in the store the night that, like, we have the footage from, that was told about the consignment deal, and then was told by the person on the phone that he would be taking over that consignment, and was tasked with doing inventory of the store. I could buy that person, whether it was Brandon or someone else. Maybe I'm mistaken on that. I don't want to be accusing the wrong person. And again, this is all just a theory. It's like, we'll see what happens. But I could see that maybe they either didn't believe the story or thought that, half the store has these stickers on it. Let's start taking those off. Maybe to be as charitable as possible. Maybe they thought that Crystal was working with Brian, and so she had marked a bunch of Bam's own inventory. If she got kicked out of her store, Brian would come in and say, hey, you have to give me all of this inventory, and, you know, it would be like, you know, Bam would legally be just handing over their own inventory for free. Maybe that's what he thought would happen. And so he started to remove a whole bunch of the stickers. And so now it's at a point where Bam can't actually tell their inventory from what was Brian's inventory. They're not sure which sold or what didn't sell. You know, and so it became a nightmare. And so they decided, well, our best action is to tell Brian to just go screw himself, and just hope that it all blows over. Not a great plan, you know, as Tony Stark would put it. Not a great plan. But, you know, that's just a theory. Hopefully, I mean, so I guess I should get into Bricks and Minifigs corporate. You know, Eamon McNeff and your brother, like, if you're listening, which I would doubt that you are, but then again, with the live streams you've been on, maybe you are just looking for any sort of video response. But as a fellow Utahn, as a former customer, I would like you to reimburse Brian. Honestly, at this point, I think your greatest PR move would be making a public statement that says, hey, we are really sorry that you've gone through this. You don't have to admit fault. Just say that, you know, we're sorry that this has happened to you. We're sorry to hear about your dad's health problems. And, you know, we want to look out for other people in the community. So here's $400,000. Send your kids to college and get your dad's medical bills paid off. You know, like, we want to do right by our community. Then everyone in corporate needs to publicly step down. You know, take an early retirement, you know, get whatever pension package you want, but you need to step down and allow other people to take in those positions. You also need to offer your franchisees an opportunity to go independent. You know, not all of them will take it. A lot of them probably like being attached to a corporate franchise. You know, that's fine. But I think some of them at this point are going, yeah, you've done a lot of reputational damage. I would be better off being my own store. So I think you need to give them the opportunity to just go independent. You know, tell them that they can have their own store and have that inventory, and, you know, they can go independent. They just need to change their names and, like, give back whatever signage they have. You know? And then the new corporate can come up with a new brand to go under. Because at this point, you have sullied the Bricks and Minifigures brand. Like, I don't think they're going to be able to call the company that anymore. Like, it is sullied. So if you want to save it, you're going to have to let new people come in and come up with a new brand so that people know, hey, this isn't being run by the same people. This is an entirely new thing, you know, and let it be that. I really think that's your only way out of this. I think that, you know, if you go through the courts, even if you win, right? Sorry, but public opinion will not look good when you go, yeah, this guy said that we stole his fucking collection. You know what we did? We took him to jail! Like, yeah, that doesn't look good. No one will, like, no regular person will be like, oh man, that makes me want to do business with you. Like, you know, it's like, no. Like, in what world could that possibly look good? You know? Like, unless you're gonna go to court and prove that fucking Reckless Ben raped my wife, like, sorry, but like, you know, anything short of that, and people are gonna go, wow, you're just an asshole. Like, you know, you're just fucking over the little guy. Like, that's it. Like, you know, I don't care how legally you win, that's what will happen. So, like, you know, and guess what? I'm not going to charge you as much as your fucking PR firm did, you know, and you clearly ignored their advice. So maybe listen to mine, you know, if you're listening. I doubt you are, but like, you know, if you choose to listen to this, then yeah, that's how I would go about it. You know, sure, you probably will have to deal with court and stuff, but if you make a good enough PR move and you get Brian out of the situation, then Ben will start to look like an asshole if he continues to go after the new brand, right? If the new brand is all run by new people that aren't associated with you, you know, and Brian has been made whole, and Ben continues to go after you, then public perception of Ben will start to go down. That people will start going, okay, this is all for clicks. This is clearly, like, you know, absurd. They did the right thing. Why is he still going after them? So, like, you know, that's really, I think, the only way out of this is if you do those things. If you well over reimburse Brian, you step down, you offer your franchisees independence, and then the next team rebrands. I think those 4 steps are the only things that you can do at this point to really get yourselves out of this. Because, sorry, but if you think you're going to continue to do TROs and, you know, oh boy, we're going to get Reckless Ben to take down those videos, like, yeah, good luck, you know? Oh, well, we're going to sue Patreon. Yeah, good luck. They're going to extend that out into court until you can't pay for it anymore, because they are a bigger company than you. Like, you know, they're going to do the same thing to you that you wanted to do to Brian. So have fun with that, I guess, if that's really the course you want to go. But, yeah, I don't know. I would hope that if you've stuck around, if you've watched this whole video, I would hope that you feel a bit more informed on the situation. I know it's not a perfect video. It was never really intended to be that. You know, it obviously, like I recommended at the beginning, please go watch the other videos for more full context. But I hope this is a good starting off point, and we'll see where this goes. Cause yeah, man, it has been a crazy ride so far that has taken so many twists and turns that I would have never imagined. So who knows what is coming next? But thank you for watching, and bye bye.